South Africa's economy cannot continue to grow at less than 1%, as it has averaged in the last 10 years. What that indicates is an economy that is stuck, really without growth in infrastructure, but ultimately lacking the skills that you need to grow the economy. Education is a fundamental pillar as it comes to any form of economic growth in any nation. And therefore, as our matriculants begin their exams on Monday, the 21st of October, I want to wish every single matriculant who will be writing this year the best of success. We wish them strength, we wish them calm, and ultimately our prayers are with them in the work that they're doing. It is ultimately the assessment of their efforts, but the dedication that they've shown to getting through this as a cohort that has spent so much of its high school through a period of COVID and now will be writing exams. But ultimately, fellow South Africans, every one of the 13 million learners in schools across the country is often routinely let down by the current education system. We perpetuate the duality of our education system, where if you have money, you can get a very good education with smaller classrooms. And if you don't have money, you end up in crowded classrooms with more and more challenges as far as infrastructure and teachers not being able to operate fully within those schools. And therefore, the appointment of the new Minister of Basic Education, Minister Gwarube, gives us the best opportunity to part with yesterday's practice and begin to produce an education for the future. We cannot fulfill the age-old dream that says that young people who linger in townships will linger there in dormitories of unemployment. And therefore, today we are here, and in my work as the chair of the Standing Committee on Appropriations, but also as leader of BOSA, to simply say we are here to fight deliberately and consciously for ensuring that the education budget going into the 2025-2026 period does not get cut, as already been indicated. These cuts are significant. They're not just, they're an exchange cut. See, much of the money that has been spent has been given to state-owned companies, cutting away from frontline services, of which education is one. It will, in its net effect, see 3,000 teachers get cut in the Western Cape, and school feeding programs being cut in Gauteng, and infrastructure build being taken away from the Eastern Cape progressively. South Africa will spend more money effectively over the long period on servicing debt than it will in advancing education. And therefore we stand with the committee, and I stand with Minister Gwarube in going back to the Minister of Finance to fight for an increase in the budget allocation that goes to education. Ultimately, any cuts in education disproportionately affect poor learners, because if you are in quintile, the poorest quintiles, quintiles 1, 2, and 3, if you are in those quintiles, your classroom sizes become bloated, effectively because they can't supplement by giving governing body posts, as you find in many schools. So invariably what happens is that when a classroom was already at the ratio of 1:60, it ends up at 1:70 progressively, which, having spent time in the classroom, is simply unsustainable. Not only have we traded that for giving state-owned companies, we've also traded that by doing what I believe President Ramaphosa ought not to have done, which was to bloat the cabinet and increase the number of deputy ministers that are in the country. I urge again that let it be symbolically so that heading into this midterm budget policy statement, what we have to do is begin to cut all the fat. And I have been spending a lot of money combing through the budget in preparation for the MTPPS, and items such as the size of cabinet, protection of ministers and deputy ministers, luxury vehicles, travel, ministerial houses, along with any additional bailouts that go to state-owned companies, indicate a mispriority as it comes to expenditure dedicated towards education. Fellow South Africans, we cannot choose politicians ahead of pupils. It's a fundamental right in the Constitution for us to provide education. I have engaged and will be engaging Minister Dongwana that at this year's MTPPS, the indication must be to cut the fat, and ultimately in the February budget to ensure that we prioritize our children, achieving the vision that says we will reduce classroom sizes and invest in the future of our children. BOSA will equally so be tabling our 10-point plan to fix basic education. The annual appropriation for education sits at over 300 billion rands. It is ultimately a reflection of one of the largest in the continent, and fairly. So the issue here, in many ways, doesn't only mean that there's a budget cut in the 300 billion rands, but it is also an indicator of the fact that where we are allocating money, the limited resources aren't always spent in the right areas. My challenge to Minister Gwarube looks as follows in terms of key implementable plans going into the medium term so that we can begin to turn around the fortunes of education. The first is I would urge that we drop the 30% pass mark. It cannot be that young people are being assessed proficient in a subject at 30%. The Department of Education likes to qualify this issue by saying, no, it's standard grade, higher grade, all of that. The reality of it is that it all impacts young people in terms of their competitiveness. As I said to President Ramaphosa, we are not competing for jobs amongst fellow South Africans. We are competing for jobs in the international market. And so if you underskill your young people, you limit their ability to participate domestically and fight internationally. Secondly, I would urge Minister to introduce an independent education ombudsman. This way we can ensure that standards are being kept up, and we can ensure that we monitor pass rates and standards so that we can upend the quality of teaching that takes place in the classroom. And therefore, I would urge that we establish this independent education ombudsman urgently. It would effectively monitor and assess school standards, teacher excellence, and complaints independently of the Department of Basic Education, reporting directly to Parliament. Furthermore, I do urge that we need to raise salaries of teachers and curtail union power. This might sound contradictory to the fact, but in all harsh reality, we find out that in industry, you find many maths and science teachers finding alternative work opportunities there. The net effect of it is because they can't survive on the DBE salary, and so they end up having to work elsewhere. With respect to maybe other industries, I would urge that we need our teachers in classrooms, not selling printers, etc., in those sectors. I would rather have them in classrooms. We have to build a world-class teaching environment if South Africa is going to achieve its developmental objectives. My vision isn't just so that kids pass and get through school. It's so that they go to world-class facilities. We can't have more Maibuyas in this world, schools that are dysfunctional. What we need is actually world-class facilities, world-class teaching, freeing up teachers to educate so that we're not stuck with people who are underpaid, who are doing a job because it's the only job they can find, and ultimately meaning that you have a situation where the quality of teaching is getting poorer. My daughter starts high school, so I'm heavily invested in this subject, not for personal reasons, but also for interest of every child in this country. She has to learn life orientation, which I still, for the life of me, don't understand why. Life orientation has not helped prepare young people for decisions they have to make in society, in life. They simply can't do critical reasoning, and I find more and more young people are not only even unskilled when it comes to matters of constitutionality, etc. We urge once again for the replacement of life orientation as a mandatory subject and replaced with critical thinking. I would urge, where there are young people who succeed, we must incentivize students during the academic year, those who achieve high levels in STEM subjects. We must, fellow South Africans, prioritize primary phase of education. In truth, many of our learners, when it comes to Pupils and other assessment standards, cannot read for meaning. It is an indicator of the fact that if your child all the way up to grade 4 is not competitive at that level, the potential of them being able to get through school diminishes. When I engaged the Minister of Basic Education, I asked the question, what is one of the #1 reasons why young people drop out of school? And one of the #1 reasons is because they fail. So once a child fails a grade, they step out of the system. So if that is one of the reasons, be assured, if we do not capacitate young people in earlier grades, it is probable and likely that they will not be able to finish school, let alone be able to be proficient in the long run. I would urge that we introduce a school voucher program to give young people and parents the right to choose. If you've got money in this country, you can choose the education of your child. If you don't, you simply can't. And so therefore, we need to be able to introduce a school voucher program. This will act as a backbone towards what then becomes charter schools, where more and more people can make the choice as to where they want to send their schools for education purposes. In the long term, we need to expand extended programs for underperforming learners. This way, young people are not left behind. We need to reprioritize the budget for digital learning and infrastructure. And lastly, let's assess the quality of teachers that are across. One of the things the unions have been successful at is making sure that the annual national assessments are a thing of the past, they are hidden, and invariably you end up with teachers in classrooms in certain instances who cannot pass the subject that they are teaching. Therefore, it's important that we get the appropriate skills for teachers that can come through. Fellow South Africans, I cannot underscore enough the crucial nature of what it means to have a good education. If apartheid oppressed people on the basis of giving them Bantu education, we cannot, at 30 years of freedom, simply say we are going to perpetuate a scenario where money is the new distinguisher as to what education you get, or the circumstances of your birth determining what education you get. This is not the dream we fought for. This is certainly not the country we want to live in, and ultimately a future that is undesirable. So it is in the interest of all South Africans that even in these matric exams they go well, but in the long run, we ensure that the 24,000 schools who are under the supervision of the DBE with 13 million learners, that they are able to be given a resilient, powerful, future-focused education system. Thank you very much.